The great success in the Montreal Canadiens of the 60s and 70s was based on the NHL amateur and entry draft. But this guy wasn't drafted, but he was centered on at an early age. And when he made the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1993, a lot of people basically said he was the last great undrafted player that the Habs really brought into the fold. Of course, we have to be talking about point two, Guy Lapointe. Born Guy Jean Lapointe in Montreal on March 1848. He played for the Habs in their dynasty years of the 70s, as well as the Blues and Bruins. He retired in 2020 after serving as coordinator of amateur scouting for the Minnesota Wild for 2 decades, and he was also as a bench coach. Now, point two, play on these name in French, where point two carries most of the same meanings as sharp or pointy in English, known for his jokes and ribs and sometimes drinking the wrong glass of Coke. It's according to Ken Dryden's game. Lapointe was famous for his powerful slap shot and brutal body checks. Along with defenseman Larry Robinson and Sir Savard, Lapointe was a member of the Big Three and played a key role in the Canadiens winning the Stanley Cup 6 times from 71, 73, and 76 to 79 inclusive. When he was traded to the Blues in 82, he eventually signed with the Bruins after the following season. He retired in 84 following a series of injuries. Now, Lapointe's career with the Habs was also damaged by injuries. He was very rarely get more than 70 games a season. Now, inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame in 93, in 884 NHL contests, Lapointe recorded 171 goals and 451 assists for 622 points. He still holds the Habs record for most goals in the season for a defenseman with 28 and most goals for a rookie defenseman with 15. His number 5 was retired by the Habs on November 8, 2014. Since the number 5 is already retired on behalf of Bernie Jaffrillon, they will both share the honor. Interestingly, similar to Jaffrillon, the number was raised side by side with a number of other members whose numbers were already retired before him, though at this time being the 2 other members of the Big Three, Savard and Robinson. Now, Savard and Robinson's banner were lowered halfway and raised back up to the rafters with Lapointe's banner, just like what they did with Bernie Jaffrillon and his father-in-law, Howie Morenz. Now, Lapointe was also known for his great sense of humor, being a prankster. One of the most famous pranks is probably the Vaseline-coated handshake with then Prime Minister Pierre-Elliott Trudeau as he was visiting the Habs locker room. Another time, Lapointe stole rookie Omer Tremblay's new Pontiac Grand Prix and relocated it to a different level of that parking garage, then waiting a few days before disclosing that to Tremblay, who had already filed a police report and contacted insurance. Now, following his retirement from playing, he became GM of the Longueuil Chevalier of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, following by a stint as an associate coach with the Nordiques. He later served as an AC and later as a scout with the Flames. He was a chief amateur scout with the Minnesota Wild, a position he's held from the franchise inception in 2000 to 2020. Now, father of 3 beautiful children, Guy Jr., Stephanie, and Jordan. Now, Lapointe's early junior career didn't give any indication of how big it was going to be, except for his 68 season. Now, 3 years of minor major junior with the Verdun Junior Maple Leafs in 66. He had 20 points in 37 contests. 67, played 12 games in the postseason for them. 68 with the junior Habs, 147 minutes of penalties. It was a fighter back then. 38 points, 11 goals, and 7 points in the postseason. 69 with the Habs, he played 1 contest, but he had some seasoning in 69 with the Houston Apollos. 3 goals, 15 assists for 18 points, with 120 minutes in penalties. Now, 1970 with the Habs, he had 5 contests, but the Voyageurs, again, another year of seasoning, 8 goals, 30 assists for 38 points, with 92 minutes in penalties and 8 points in the postseason. Now, 71 was the breakthrough year, and this was, I think, was a big part in Montreal winning the Cup because J.C. Tremblay was getting a little bit old. So was Laperriere. Rookie campaign, 15 goals, 29 assists, 44 points, 170 minutes in penalties, and in 20 postseason games, 9 points, only 4 counters. 72, he had 11 counters. 73, 19. 74, 13. 75, the breakout year. 75 points. The 76, 68 points. 77, 76 points. 78, again, injury plague season. 13 goals, 29 assists for 42 points in 49 games. 79, again, didn't reach the 70 game mark. 13 goals, 42 assists for 55 points. Now, 80, 81 were injury plagued for Guy. He only played a little over 30 and 40 games in all 3 seasons. And by 82, he was traded to St. Louis, where he had his first postseason with them in that campaign. St. Louis in 83, 3 goals, 23 assists for 26 points, and 1 point in the postseason. And with the Bruins, 2 goals, 16 assists for 18 points. So he only made one NHL All-Star team, which is pretty freaky to think about, but we all know how good he was. He was a second All-Star team, 75, 76, and 77, and he played in 4 All-Star contests, 73, 75, 76, and 77. Now, Super Series in 72, one of their better defensive players, 1 assist, and the Canada Cup in 76, 4 assists in 7 games. Now, early in his NHL career, again, Lapointe was chosen to play an historic 72 Summit Series against USSR. Lapointe accepted the invitation, regardless of the fact his wife would give birth to his first child, Guy Jr., during the series, while the team was in USSR. Again, he would compete for Canada in that historic 76 Canada Cup and the 79 Challenge Cup against the Soviets, would replace that year's All-Star contest. So, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, Lapointe was you could see Lapointe and Savard on the ice, and Robinson their own way, but Lapointe was more of his own style of play. There was no specific style. You look at the current players for Montreal, like Demidov and Hudson and Suzuki and Caulfield, you have a certain style of play. But he could drop the gloves at the same time too, like he wasn't scared to be aggressive. But I mean, in the dressing room, ladies and gentlemen, if all the stories are true from what I heard, I mean, there was always something going on. I think the biggest rib on him, but I guess he went for a perm and he tried to mat it down before the game started, and his hair kind of expanded while the contest was going on with the heat and the of the rink and the cold of the ice. So Guy Lapointe, a top 20 Montreal Canadian of all time, in my personal opinion, because the big three has got to be top 20, so they got to be in there. It's very interesting. Bret Hart made an interesting comment, the famous podcast in Montreal on the November 20 weekend. He said he stopped being a fan of the Montreal Canadiens because they were winning all the time. And that's what happened. The people were turning against Montreal. If the 3 players like Lapointe, so you can't even say Lapointe was saying Savard and Robinson, the big 3 changed hockey, and the big 3 have not been seen since. There's never been 3 big defensemen like that in hockey since that time. There have been 2, but not 3. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's the story of Point 2. If you like what you're doing here with our Montreal Canadian podcast, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share.